In this flash lecture, I discuss how to take your summaries or ability to spot obvious and apparent information and compose an analysis. The objectives of this PowerPoint are that by the end of watching this, students should be able to define summary and analysis as well as differentiate summary from analysis. Students should also be able to employ or apply UNF Wright's self-taught thesis rubric, and students should be able to inventory a text, analyze a text inventory, as well as evaluate a pattern one spots in that inventory's pattern. We begin with definitions. As discussed in a previous PowerPoint, a summary is a description of an item. For us, it's a description of a text. Descriptions or summaries in this way are described with what questions, answers to what questions, what's going on, what is the tone, what is the fill in the blank. We'll discuss more examples of what questions in a minute. Summaries also give us obvious or apparent information, that is, which is readily available to any viewer. For example, if we were to go to the Louvre and see the Mona Lisa, each of us may see the same picture and pick out different traits, but we would agree on many of the things we would say in describing it, insofar as an inventory of its parts, the frame, the dimensions of it, the kind of paper that it's on, the kind of paint being used, the lines that define the images, for example. This information is obvious or apparent, and in this way, we don't argue about it. Analysis, however, is a matter of argument. Analysis, we may disagree in what we see and how we see it. For this reason, we're looking for patterns. We're recognizing patterns within the text's inventory. Composed of answers to how questions, this information is normally non-obvious, and it requires that we read the text. And we're going to define reading later on in this PowerPoint. Analysis, however, comes from a Greek root and essentially means to take something apart, to separate it, to break it down. Lastly, evaluation. Pretty common noun. For our purposes, though, it means to assign value. It's almost always non-obvious, meaning it requires us to name it. And normally, values come from outside of a text, and normally we have to put them onto the text. Some examples, or one example of these concepts in everyday use, we might think about the iPhone. It's pretty ubiquitous. We see it almost everywhere we go. If we don't ourselves have one, we know someone who does. What are the parts inside of an iPhone? This is a summary statement. This is the inventory. What are the parts of it? It has a front, it has a back piece, it has a glass, it has the top portion in which you maybe plug it in, or even newer model, and it's on the bottom portion. You have the charger port, all kinds of parts, but you could inventory them. These are what information. Analysis, how do the parts work together? And evaluation, why this formulation? Why not another formulation? You can see this perhaps in the reasons why they changed the iPhone through each of its iterations, adding value to it, perhaps we could argue. For our purposes, though, we talk about texts, not iPhones so much. Although you can text with an iPhone, I suppose. Texts are textiles, things that are made. Anything that you could put together or take apart is a text. However, we want to go ahead and consider what this word gives us as far as how we use it in our everyday lives. Text, tissue, architect, tectonic, technique, technical, technology. All these kinds of words give you an idea about the implicit nature of text and how involved it is in our everyday lives. It's everywhere. As a result, everything that is not monadic, that is, everything that is non-atomic, not one part, but made of many parts, is comprised of many parts, is a text. Although we should note that an atom is comprised of many parts. It's just the idea is, if it's atomic, it's usually one. So the easy question to move on then is, what do we do with texts? We read them. But for the moment at least, and for this conversation, we should bracket the idea that reading means to take our eyes, apply them to words, and then make meaning out of it. That's actually a very convoluted and long process that we make very quick because we have brains that are very capable of doing that. Some examples of reading without texts. We drive up to a stop sign and we stop. Or maybe we roll through it, depending on whether we see it safe or not, treating it like a yield sign. We read the situation. Or when you try to cross the street, when you see the walk sign or the walk image or the walk word, you're reading the situation. Yes, you're reading the word, but you're also reading the situation to see if it's safe. You might see the word walk in a car speeding at you, and you decide to read it in such a way that you don't cross the street. You may walk into a room and read the mood by reading someone's face or body language, or many people's faces and body language, and know what's going on or be able to intuit what's going on. You're reading the situation. Lastly, you might look at a piece of art and just get it. You've read it with your eyes, we might say your heart, and you understand it. Next, we talk about how does a text work. We know what its parts are, or we kind of assume we do, at least for the time being. But when we have an idea, we want to put it into words to share with other people. If we want to do it out loud and in person, we have a conversation, we don't usually think twice about the words we use. When we want a lot of people to hear our idea, say like one of the chapters in our reader, for example, those authors and we as authors might take our words, reorganize them, revise them, find the right way to organize them so they reflect what we thought originally or most approximated. After these are static and put online or put in a book, for example, others can access them. They can see the words and they can take meaning from them. Well, the problem here is that not all the meaning transmits itself. The reader himself or herself has the ability to read things differently than we intend. And so for this reason, intention and perception become somewhat problematic and distinct. This is why we try to slow down the process for our purposes. This is why we first need to inventory the parts of the text. We ask what questions? What are its components of the text? Who's writing? Who's narrating? What is his or her character? What makes the person credible? What is the arrangement of the parts of the text? What is the reading level of the text? You may think diction. What is the text's tone, its purpose, its setting, its themes, its imagery, its metaphors, its... Fill in the blank. You're describing it. You're trying to label its parts so anyone would say, yes, I agree with you. That's included in that. Static information, factual information that no one will argue with you about. In this way, you're doing summary. If you were to get out your thesis rubric right now, you would see that a level 1 score thesis is a summary statement. If you were to tell me that the Mona Lisa is a picture of a woman, I would not disagree with you. Although others might argue about whether the model was a man or woman, we're talking about what we see in front of us. In a basic sense, this is a non-argumentative way to do things. The sky is blue, for example. Non-argumentative. From summary, then, analysis. This is the part where you're able to take the parts apart and identify the patterns, the connections, the discrepancies. These are analytic statements that are non-obvious. That is, the text doesn't tell you what it's doing or how it's doing it. You instead have to identify that. And normally we do this through the way we feel about things, the way we have personal affect and respond to things, and this is how we read things. However, that's a complicated process that we can slow down and look for patterns and be very cognizant of things. We ask how questions. How does that text operate? How does one component relate to any other component? How does a text contradict itself or reinforce itself? How does it succeed? How does it fail, for example? These are all qualifications that you can argue, and someone may disagree with you, for example. From this we get the thesis, the argumentation, the point that someone else may disagree with you on. It's not a sky is blue kind of statement. Rather, it's a should statement, or you should believe this fact statement. Your answers to the how question are your thesis. So for example, if you pull out your thesis rubric, you would see that a level 2 thesis, for our purposes, is an analytic statement that stops short of giving an implication. Any answer to a how question then is an argument. That is, it's outside of the text, and someone could disagree with you because his outside or her outside of the text is different from yours. Evaluation, then. Once you have an argument, you have to give it value. If it has no value, it just free floats in a vacuum and is easily dismissed. It's worth noting, then, that all arguments are not equally valuable. The scope of your argument depends on your argument's value. So an argument about the meaning of the Mona Lisa may take 1 paragraph, 1 page, 10 pages, 100 pages, 100 years, depending on what you're trying to suss out and how painstakingly detailed you're attempting to be. Another way to consider value is implication, and you see this language reflected in the course rubric for thesis. When you score a level 3 or 4 thesis, that means you have an analytical statement with at least 1 or 2 implications. That's the value of the statement. I like to think of it in terms of in order to. So this pattern is present in order to, and you can fill in the blank, as you'll see in the next example. UNF campus parking. Few would argue that it's a success. Many students, in fact, complain repeatedly, semesterly, that we don't have enough parking. Well, if you're not in that position, that's okay. We could inventory what's going on campus. We can find out the number of spaces we can park in and the number of students and faculty who can be here at a given time. And more than likely, we will find there are more spots, or rather more faculty, more staff, more students than parking spots. That's a fact. That's a statement. The sky is blue on that level. For this reason, we don't have an argument yet, but we can form an argument based on the pattern recognition. We see a discrepancy, we see a difference, and in finding this difference, we have the opportunity now to make an argument. And you'll notice the should expression here in the second part of this statement. Because campus has fewer parking spots than students and faculty, we should add more parking spots. But why? What's the in order to, the so what, the implication of the statement? How do we evaluate the claim? Well, because campus has fewer parking spots than students and faculty, we should add more parking spots in order to make it easier for students to get to class on time. Or we could cut out the first part of the statement, just begin, we should add more parking spots in order to make it easier for students to get to class on time, or to have a better existence on campus, or to unclutter our parking situation, or fill in the blank with your reason, the value you think is present in your claim. In this way, then, you should have a better understanding of the language present in the thesis rubric.